Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here with another Master Duel video for y'all. So today we're coming back to Branded Despia, much like we did at Emancipator recently. I'm coming back to this deck now that Aluber has formally gone to 2, and seeing how I feel about this particular build. And it's interesting, I've noticed over the last couple of days, I've been looking at some data from like Master Duel meta and just other various sources, and I'm kind of astounded to see like how little play Branded Despia is seeing across many different tier lists online. Of course including Master Duel metas, which is mostly tournaments, but even if you just look at the usage numbers, we're seeing like a pretty severe decrease in the number of people actually playing Branded Despia. And I think that's actually happened for a few different reasons. I think there's like 3 different factors that have kind of like culminated into Branded Despia all of a sudden appearing as if it's a tier 2 deck. And those 3 things are going to be, 1, the fact that, more people are playing Sword Soul Tenyi because I think they feel like that Sword Soul Tenyi has a better matchup. Not just feel like, it does have a better matchup against Runic. Branded Despia, for people who are particularly concerned about Runic, I guess, are, this definitely seems like the riskier of those 2, like, tier 1 decks to play. 2, on top of that, we're seeing Mech come into the picture. And I think a lot of people who, would have or were playing Branded Despia have kind of, moved now to trying Mech being, of course, a very good deck and also a newer deck. Lots of people kind of, want to try that deck out more. And then I think the 3rd factor, albeit a minor one, is the fact that Albion did, in fact, go down to 2. Now, I don't think that this actually hampered the deck's, consistency enough to, cause such a severe dip in play, but it is definitely a factor as well. So when you put all these things together, I think that, kind of culminates to, again, Branded Despia is just seeing much less play overall in the just in the data that we're seeing coming in here. And I think we're actually gonna, if we're not already there, I think we're gonna reach a point pretty quickly where people might actually be sleeping on this deck and kind of forget that this is still a very powerful deck within this meta. And honestly, as more people are playing Sword Soul Tenyi, and then, a new tier 1 deck like Mech comes in, that kind of results not in a whole lot less, but that results in Runic being less favored, and then in turn, a bit less played in this format as well. And then when that starts to happen, you'll see, I think, Branded Despia start to get a little bit better. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that, just in terms of, again, sheer number of people using it, this deck has definitely taken quite a hit. But in terms of its actual power level, I think the deck is still fine. Now, as far as this build in particular goes that I kind of put together, I will say that I think the 3 Allure of Darkness is a bit much. I've considered going down to 2. I think I might go back down to 0 if I'm being completely frank, because, when Alba went to 2, I was like, okay, let's see, can we make up for consistency in the deck at all? And I don't think we need to compensate so much as to be playing a playset of Allure of Darknesses. I did consider maybe playing continuing to play 3 Allure, but with 3 Despain Tragedy and also 3 Edge Imp Chain, just to have more targets to banish for it. But I don't know, I feel like Allure doesn't feel like it's particularly drawn me into Aluber and or Branded Fusion a significant number of times. And for that reason, I'm just kind of thinking of cutting it all together. Getting some more imperms maybe in here, maybe getting Branded Lost and or Mercurier back in here. Who knows, just any number of things could be reintroduced into the deck at that point. So yeah, I don't know. As far as, again, the deck's just overall power level goes, I really don't think it's taken that big of a hit, but I've noticed it too, not just in the, Master Duel meta, Diamond decks or whatever, but just in my own personal playing, I've also kind of seen I'm not seeing nearly as much Branded Despia as I have in the time leading up to this. And yeah, it's just interesting. It's interesting how in particular Master Duel meta tends to shift so suddenly. We don't see this in TCG or OCG because we get all of our information from major tournaments, which don't happen very regularly. Even regional tournaments don't happen every single weekend necessarily. So in that regard, it's the meta tends to shift a lot more slowly. But here in Master Duel, where people are constantly able to play at a competitive level, we have it's also a lot easier to obtain new cards and decks in Master Duel than it tends to be in the TCG and OCG as well. So more people are able to not only play more, but also try out more new decks. And again, I think that's why we tend to see these kind of sudden shifts here. So That I think mostly accounts for why we're not seeing, you know, any more branded, or not anymore at all, but we're seeing less branded Despia. I don't think it means the deck is dead or that's even weaker, but I think it's a representation thing, which is why I, you know, have said in the past and will continue to say that representation is as much of a factor in a deck's place in the meta as its power level. So that's just my 2 cents. But in any case, I'm going to go ahead and break down this list card by card. I haven't changed it yet, but again, I'm pretty heavily considering just cutting Allures altogether. If I don't cut Allures, I definitely want a third Despain Tragedy and or Edge Imp Chain, but nah, instead of just, you know, trying to make room for those extra copies, I think I'd rather just kind of cut the engine, so to speak, of Allures altogether. But anyway, we are playing in this iteration 1 Effect Veiler, 2 Despain Tragedy, 3 Maxx, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 2 Edge Imp Chain, 1 Fairy Tale Snow, 2 Fallen of Albaz, 2 Aluber the Jester of Despia, 1 Ad Libitum of Despia, 1 Nibiru the Primal Being, 2 Polymerization, 1 Foolish Burial, 3 Allure of Darkness, 2 Frightfur Patchwork, 3 Branded Fusion, 2 Super Polymerization, 2 Call by the Grave, 1 Crossout Desginator, 2 Branded Opening, 2 Branded in Red, 1 Infinite Impermanence, and then finally 1 Branded Banishment. For the extra deck, we're playing 1 Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, 1 Predaplant Dragostepelia, 2 Albion the Branded Dragon, 1 Despian Quaretits, 2 Masquerade the Blazing Dragon, 2 Mirrorjade the Iceblade Dragon, don't know why I hesitate on that, 2 Lubellion the Searing Dragon, 1 Alba-Lenatus the Abyss Dragon, 2 Guardian Chimera, and then I actually have, because I've kind of already been tinkering with the deck a little bit, I have Predaplant Anaconda in here, but I didn't actually have it in my extra deck during these games you're about to see. Instead I had, what was it, not Starving Venom Fusion, that's right here. Oh, what was it? It was in the previous iteration. I'm just struggling to remember what the actual card was, but it's a fusion we didn't summon too often. Oh, it was Titanklad the Ash Dragon, so that was actually in the list here over Predaplant Anaconda. This is one of those changes I was thinking of making, but in any case, that is the list. Now let's go ahead and take a look at these duels. So the first game here is going to be, once again, against that like 60 card Pendulum pile that results in Adventure 10U line that I featured relatively recently. This is actually another game against that deck, and you know, as I said in that last video that I played against this deck, I've continued to actually play against it fairly consistently. Is this one actually 60 cards? No, this one's only 45, so this one's not quite the 60 card variant, but yeah, for those of you who haven't actually run into this deck yet, the idea is that it plays multiple Pendulum engines that'll ultimately lead to them having like a Barricade Borg blocker. It's typically, from what I've experienced playing against the deck, like they eventually go into Barricade Borg blocker plus the Mechs, the Symphonic Warrior Mechs, and then that goes into Auroradon, and then they do, you know, we all remember Adventure 10U, right? Alright, so I'm going to start off with a pretty typical setup here. Because I have the Poly, I get to throw on a Dragostepelia on top of a live Mirrorjade, which will be nice. And then I get to set Call by here as well, so I would definitely say this is a slightly above average opening. In the past, I tended to end on like a Masquerade on turn 1, but I've been leaning more to Dragostepelia a lot lately. The burn can matter a lot, but I think the monster negate, like, when it matters, it tends to matter a lot more than the burn, like, ever matters. So I think the Dragostepelia, I like leaning into that a little bit more nowadays. Yeah, they're going to start off with the Zephyr Providence for Zephyroth there. Is it? Yeah, Zephyroth. Then they have an Oracle of Zephyr here as well for the Yangzing one. So that's a pretty solid start from what I can gather. I don't know. Now, okay, as soon as this hits the graveyard, I'm definitely going to call by it because, like, I may not know a whole lot about this archetype, but I know enough about Pendulum to know that when Freaking Dragon Darkworm hits the graveyard, like, you know, shit's about to go down. So I'm going to definitely want to make sure I can prevent that if at all possible here. Also, again, I've said this a lot, but, like, in general, if you can prevent, like, a decent amount of searches, and just try to leave them with as many of their opening cards as you can, that tends to be better in decks that are heavily reliant on searching, and or go, like, above 40 cards consistently, like this deck, like Dragon Link, like, I'm trying to think of another example. The Adventure Phantom Knight's kind of like that a little bit. They have got the Call by here, looks like, from their, or from my Branded Red, so that's definitely annoying, but it's not the end of the world by any means. especially because I've been able to take quite a few of their resources, like I took their search there with the, what do you call it, the Dragostepelia. So I'm definitely going to banish this Electromite as soon as it hits the board, because I don't really care if they put a monster from their deck into their extra deck, that's fine, because they've already Pendulum summoned. Yeah, they're going to concede at that point, because what they're really looking to do is blow up one of their scales, or however it works. Adding a Pendulum card from the extra deck to their hand is really what they were trying to do, and I definitely want to stop that from happening. But since they've already Pendulum summoned, I don't really care. They're just sending a card from their deck to the extra deck, and then once that's off the field, they've only got one more card left in hand. So, yeah, even though we didn't get a chance to resolve Branded in red there, making sure that you have, if possible, the Dragostepelia plus live Mirrorjade on turn 1 is very, very crucial. Win it all, you can go for that, because that's going to provide multiple negates and disruption that are not reliant on your Branded in red, which can pretty easily get called by it. So there's that game. Let's go and take a look at the next duel. Got another 60 card, well, I guess we didn't play against 60 card deck last time, but we were playing against a 60 card deck this time. This time it's going to be a Paleo Frog deck, so we're going to take the first turn, and we didn't open any disruption, so it's definitely not ideal, especially against a deck that's going to, set a bunch of cards before passing back to us. So definitely have to be mindful of how we play into our opponent's back row this game. But we already have a pretty great start here. Having access to the Branded in red and Branded Fusion right off the bat is pretty good. Plus a Frightfur Patchwork, and then we even get to dig for some stuff with Allure as well. Getting another copy of Allure here is actually pretty nice too. Now, I decided to normal summon the Alba, even though I didn't really need the search, because my opponent didn't have a monster for me to take with Albaz, so I figured, this is probably the best normal summon opportunity I'm going to have here. I thought about potentially using this Allure with the Albaz, but I wanted to make sure that I got my Lubellion, mainly that I activated my Branded Fusion first, so that way I didn't accidentally draw the other Albaz, and then, yeah, the Branded Fusion gets definitely worse at that point. And just my hand in general, too. The Allure is definitely worse at that point. Now that I've done, all this searching and gotten rid of all these bad draws, now I'll go ahead and Allure. Not that, the Foolish or the... Once I draw the other Branded Fusion are really going to do a whole lot for me here. Ooh, excuse me. But that's kind of... This game kind of was one of the main... This is one of those games where I was like, alright, if I'm resolving multiple Allures and it's not really, doing what I want it to do here, or it's not really that helpful, why am I really playing this card? It's to be fair, it is to dig for stuff we already had in our opening hand, but at the same time, it just doesn't feel like it did a whole lot here, and that's kind of the case in general. I mean, there have been a couple of times where I've managed to dig to an answer with Allure, but for the most part, it just seemed a bit unnecessary, so this was definitely one of those games where, again, it was a pretty crucial deciding factor. So that Chain Link, I just want to talk about that real quick. I definitely did not want their... Where is it? Oh, I passed it. They had that new trap card. Where is it? Just look in their graveyard here. It was this one, Terrors of the Overroot. So, I definitely did not want this to resolve, which is why I ended up banishing my own monster. Plus, it'll let me get a search later, so... seemed like a pretty solid pick there. Anyway, I wanted to go into Guardian Chimera. Obviously, because not only my stuff was getting targeted, but that'll only blow up their last two back rows, and then I can just kind of, play on from there. So I actually got a little bit lucky that it was Paleozoic, because their stuff tends to do a little bit less against this deck than it might do against some other decks. I kind of thought I was walking into, some weird Labyrinth build, and my opponent was going to flip up Welcome Labyrinth, and that, I think, would have been a bit more difficult to deal with. But here, it wasn't too hard. So there's that one. Let's go and take a look at the next duel here. Alright, here we've got a game against the Mirror match, so definitely looking forward to this one, because I'm trying to remember how it plays out. I feel like I went second this game, if I recall correctly. Nope, I went first, never mind. Alright, so we did open another hand with Allure here, but we already have access to the Aluber, and we have a Branded opening too, so... I'm going to start with the Frightfur Patchwork. I tend to like to start with this because, it's a good way to see if they've got their... Or if they've got an Ash Blossom, rather. It doesn't always guarantee that they'll use it, but it's a decent way to check for it. So they're going to Veilor the Aluber, which is definitely annoying. I can potentially use this Allure to try to find a Branded Fusion here. It's a little risky because, it's not a guarantee, but and then I drew another Alba and an Ash Blossom. So this is something that people in the comments had actually pointed out that I do agree with. Oh, also, I made a misplay here. I definitely should have added this Despain Tragedy to hand because, the whole reason I was getting it in the first place was to get the effect off, and I was just going to do that by fusing, but, part of the reason I'm playing Allure is for Despain Tragedy, so it was just a reflex to special summon the monster. I didn't even think about it until after the fact, so bit of a minor misplay there, but it's not going to hugely, I think, affect things, but definitely still not ideal. In any case, though, like I was saying, yeah, with this Allure, people were pointing out in the comments that, like, you don't really have too many darks for it, and I agree. Like, we're playing not as many dark monsters, like, on paper as in practice. Like, I thought I was playing enough darks on paper, but, like, once I'm actually playing these games, I'm finding situations like this a lot where I have to kind of, like, just make do with the Allures or discard something, or banish, rather, something that I don't really want to. The 2 Despian Tragedies are really the only thing we're, like, actually actively trying to banish with the Allure, so... and then the other cards, it's not that many targets, so... That's one of the reasons I'm a bit, like, down on Allure at the moment. I did notice when I was looking at the overall, like, data spread on Master Duel meta that a lot of people are playing Allure right now. It just seems to be that the vast majority of people are playing 3 Allure with 3 Despian Tragedy. But I'm not really sure I'm super up on that, to be totally honest. And I wonder if, that's honestly affecting the overall performance of the deck. Maybe I almost can't help but wonder if we're all trying maybe a little bit too hard to compensate for Aluber going to 2 here. So, even though I only had Ash Blossom and Call by here, I was still able to time them in such a way that we were able to stop our opponent's whole turn, which is pretty miraculous. Honestly, I did not think that was going to happen. But they didn't have a response when I ashed the Branded Fusion, and they didn't have a response when I called by the Edge Imp Search. So, no fusions for them either from deck or from adding Polymerization. So, yeah, even though I wasn't even really able to combo off, I've still got the Maxx and the Ash Blossom in hand, and the opponent just clearly, by normal summoning the Edge Imp Chain, I feel like that was almost a concession in and of itself, if they hadn't, of course, then conceded immediately afterward. But, yeah, I don't know. I did misplay, like I said, not adding the Despian Tragedy to hand off the Branded opening. Definitely should have done that, but that aside, we're still able to use our Disruption in order to make sure our opponent didn't have too many plays either. So there's that game. Let's take a look at the next duel here. Alright, this next one's going to be against Sword Soul Tinny, and this one is, from what I recall, this was a pretty decent back and forth here. There was some pretty involved decision making, particularly in terms of, like, when to use the responses. So, I'm going to go first, and we have a fantastic opening hand. It's nice to open Branded Fusion, but we also got the Edge Imp Chain and a Poly, so we have that as well. And the Albaz too, like, we can just go for Lubellion from hand if we had to here, but fortunately our opponent did not have a response for the Branded Fusion here, so now I get to discard Edge Imp Chain off Lubellion, and that's going to ultimately result in me plussing. That's the one thing about this deck that, like, I think is kind of easy to forget. Like, it is very combo intensive, and in that case it can be easy to disrupt, but when it goes off, which it can not, like, terribly easily, but not terribly difficultly play through disruption, like, you just get so much advantage. Definitely still more than any current other, well, against most other meta decks. Not every single one, but here I have to normal summon my Edge Imp Chain, by the way, and banish it just to make sure that I get a Branded in red during the end phase. We definitely want to make sure we don't miss out on that. The Branded in red search is absolutely worth just normal summoning and giving up my Edge Imp Chain, because I really wasn't going to normal summon otherwise anyway, so it's like, why not? There's literally no reason not to. It's very nice that we have the Branded Banishment as well. Having access to both Banishment and Branded in red on turn 1 is just like the icing on top. Like, that's a very, very nice. This in general is just a very, very nice turn 1 board to end on here. So the opponent's going to start off with Tinny Vishuda. So I've played Sword Soul Tinny enough to know that, of course, they're going to go into Monk and then use the Vishuda to bounce one of my monsters. I have to figure they're probably going to try to bounce the Mirrorjade, because then not only will I obviously not get to banish a card later, but then I don't get the board wipe effect because it goes back to the extra deck. So I'm definitely going to want to just banish this Vishuda right away. Just get it off the board right now. For a couple of reasons. One, I don't want it in the graveyard because I don't want it to, like, even if they don't get the Monk of the Tinny, they can still get a Sword Soul token later and then just end up, using it later. On top of that, you know, I've got my Branded Red face down, and I want to go into my Guardian Chimera at some point this turn, but before I do that, if at all possible, I really want to get value out of my monsters before I fuse them away. So getting to actually use the Mirrorjade effect here on a very good target before I fuse it away for Guardian Chimera is very nice. You don't always get that luxury. Usually people will try to force you to play in a way that they make you choose whether you want to use the Mirrorjade or the Guardian Chimera, but here the opponent is also going to throw out a Moye, which is even better because now I get to also use the Dragostepelia effect. And once the Moye is negated, I'm immediately going to flip up Branded Red and go for a Guardian Chimera here to blow up their board because obviously they've got, you know, a tuner and a non-tuner. I don't want them to just fuse for level 8, which seems like is their plan here. They will get to use the, what is it called? The Ecclesia's effect in response because that is a quick effect, but the Guardian Chimera doesn't target, so I don't really care. That's totally fine. It doesn't really matter what they summon. I'm just going to blow it up anyway. So yeah, the Itaya, that's fine. The what is that card called? Why can't I think of it? The Ad Libitum, of course. You know, because we added that back off the Branded Red, that also means we get another live Mirrorjade. So we actually get 2 banishes off Mirrorjade on this turn, which is going to be very relevant as the opponent actually has a Monster Reborn of all cards to bring back the Sword Soul Taya. Now, to be fair, I do also still have the Branded Banishment face down, so actually, I don't know, I can't really fuse into anything with Taya itself, but I could have waited for the Synchro Monster to come out and then use Branded Banishment. It probably would have been Chi Xiao, so I could have just brought back like Despain Tragedy and then fuse them away for a Masquerade. So even if I didn't have like another live Mirrorjade use here, because I had Branded Banishment, I did still have an out. And honestly, if I was also playing the big Despian fusion monster, what is it called? The Despian... I'm really not remembering what it's called. It's the big, like, I think it's level 11. It's got like 3,000 attack points. It takes a Despia, a light, and a dark. There's actually a lot of Sword Soul Tennies running around that it actually might be a decent idea to have that monster in the extra deck if you have room. It might be better than the, oh, I already sent it, the Alba-Lenatus, but honestly the main reason I have this card in my extra deck is not even for the Dragon Link matchup, but it's just to have something to send to add a fusion spell card while still keeping another Albion in my extra deck. It's nice if possible to save an Albion in your extra deck to set up a potential OTK. You know, in the past, you just send both of them right away to get your Branded Red on turn 1, of course, and then following up, you could send another Albion to add a Branded Fusion. But now that we have Alba-Lenatus, you can just send that instead. And then, like I said, you can keep the Albion to potentially OTK with it, and then like Titanklad if you're playing that. So I thought that was just worth pointing out there. But anyway, as my opponent Monster Reborns the Sword Soul Taya, I am of course just going to banish it with my Mirrorjade. And even though they've got 2 cards left in hand, you know, that was their normal summon, that was pretty much everything they had. They don't really even have enough to banish for a Protoss, so even if they happen to have had that as well, which would have been really devastating actually, fortunately the banishes kept our opponent at only 2 monsters in their graveyard. I really do wish you could actually see what was in your opponent's hand during replays, but ah well. I'm just going to Branded Fusion straight up for Titanklad here. I'm just going to go for it, switch my stuff to attack mode, and it's Sword Soul Tenny. They're not going to have like Battle Fate or anything, so no need to overextend or draw the game out. I'm just going to go ahead and finish it up right there. So there is that last... Is it the last duel? No, actually, I'm sorry. I have actually one more game for us. So let's go and take a look at one last duel here. Alright, this is going to be the last game here, and it's going to be against Mech. So of course we had to sneak one in there where we're playing against the new hotness of Mech. Alright. Pretty decent enough opening hand. I mean, we've got an Aluber as long as it doesn't get negated. This is a fine hand. Or the Branded Fusion, you know, as long as they don't have the Ash Blossom. And sure enough, they don't. Yeah, the Branded Fusion is funny. Like, I do agree with the sense of it that fusing from deck tends to be too powerful, but I will say in the case of this deck, it feels a little more fair than past iterations because even though the restriction of only being able to fusion summon for the rest of the turn doesn't matter too much for this deck in particular, like, the deck still very much, like, lives and dies by Branded Fusion. And that means, like, you know, if the Branded Fusion gets negated, that's pretty often going to be, like, a loss right there for Branded Despia. So I think that is another reason why this deck tends to be a little bit less popular. Because Mech, for example, you look at Mech and they have so many different points where you can use Disruption, but they don't have any, like, one clear one where you're always going to get them. It tends to be best, I think, to negate the Albion search if possible. Oh yeah, they had a Ghost Spell for my Branded Red here. It was pretty gross, but thankfully we had the Branded Banishment. I mean, I'm not going to get to Guardian Chimera and then get the live Mirrorjade again this way, but, you know, I can still take away their Circular and then go for a Masquerade here, at the very least, but... yeah, the Maxx tend to just be a lot more resilient to that kind of disruption where, again, Branded Despia lives and dies by Branded Fusion. If Branded Fusion gets negated, then the deck is typically just done at that point. So, I don't know, it's interesting. This is a very interesting meta we're in. I don't know if it's going to continue to be interesting once sprites come out, but we'll see. I was going to say sprites and tiers, but to be fair, tiers aren't going to be... I don't imagine we're going to get sprites, tiers, and Ishizu stuff all in the same selection pack. There's no way that's going to happen. I think they'll even space it out where sprites and tiers aren't even in the same pack. So, you know... Oh, yeah, I guess at this point they just realized that, like, they can't... Like, they had some plays, but they were just costing them too many life points for just mediocre plays. Like, they had 2 level 4s, and they, like, maybe could have gone for some amount of stuff with Albion. But yeah, at that point... The Masquerade was just costing them so many life points that it wasn't going to be worth it at the end. So they ultimately ended up conceding. But yeah, I don't know. Like I was saying, I feel like we'll probably get a Sprite selection pack, then a Tier selection pack, and then maybe after that, an Ishizu selection pack. And then maybe by the time the Ishizu stuff comes out, the tier limit stuff has already been hit. Maybe it'll be pre-hit before it even comes into Master Duel. Maybe some Sprite stuff will get pre-hit. Who knows? But regardless, I think we're going to see a huge meta shakeup here pretty soon. So I think this meta is really interesting, and I'm very keen to, like, dissect it as much as possible while we're still in the midst of it. But anyway, that's all the thoughts I've got for these games. So let's just go ahead and move on to the outro now. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a whole lot to me. Not just personally, but it's also a great way of supporting the channel as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other means, you can of course feel free to comment and or subscribe right here on YouTube. I'm always looking to the comments section. You guys leave some pretty awesome feedback as far as like constructive criticism goes when it comes to deck building, gameplay, channel content, all that stuff. So feel free to leave your opinion down there. I will be sure to take a look at that there. And then subscribing is going to be the best way to get notifications of when these videos drop. That does happen every day, by the way, so if you're looking for daily Master Duel content, you've come to the right place. And there are more places where you can get some daily Master Duel content. If you check out the description below, follow the top link over to my Patreon page. There, for just $5 a month, which is as much as you pay for a booster pack, you'll find a lot more value than a pack full of filler over there. We've got some previews for content upcoming here on the channel. We've got some exclusive games that are only posted over on Patreon over there. We've got some Q&As, and then you can also have your name featured in this lovely credit sequence where I thank all of the people who are helping contribute over there on Patreon. It's a huge support to the channel, and it really means a lot as well. So thank you everyone who is donating that is featured here on screen. And again, you know, it's not just a pure donation, you do get some more daily Master Duel content over there just for being a part of the Patreon. But I think that's about all the time that I have for today's video. Once again, I just want to thank you so very much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Again, it just means a lot as I do put a decent amount of work into getting these videos out every single day. But that's about all the time that I've got for now. So without further ado, this is Xlex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.